Hey guys and girls, it's Nathan Birch here. Welcome to our final of the webinar series for Raw and Uncut. Just before I get started, can I just have everyone, or a few of you, just pop through that you can hear me correctly? Beautiful. Beautiful. Awesome, guys. So, yeah, just as I get started today, got lots of cool things to talk about. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to get started in the current property market and how to build a property portfolio, looking at all the things that I've used over the course of the last 15 years to buy properties myself. And yeah, before we get started as well, just as always, I'm not your financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I'm just here sharing my thoughts, my opinions, and some of the things that I've used in order for me to be able to, exit the workforce at the age of 24, obviously during the middle of the GFC back in 2009. So just a bit of a recap. Well, I've got on the screen here what's happening in the market. These are some of the things that we've been looking at over the course of the last 2.5 weeks as I've been doing these webinars. How to make money in 2018, 2019, understanding the monetary system, talking about how to finance through the current market, how to invest in properties moving forward, so on and so forth. So I don't want to go too much into this because those videos are there for those that haven't watched up until now to go and watch those ones. So moving right into it, I'm going to start the party today by putting up some of the reasons as to why I think that we may be heading into the GFC 2.0, or what I'm calling the GFD, which is really a result of what happened back in 2008, 2009 to stimulate the economy. So does this mean one should be scared? Personally myself, I've been signing contracts every year that have been legally able to. That's 15 years as of tomorrow. It's my birthday tomorrow. But yeah, with it, I've bought properties through every sort of market, and looking at the markets today, I'm seeing lots of opportunity. And I feel that what we're about to go into is a cycle, thanks to the birthday wishes. With it, lots of birthday messages, thanks guys. Basically, throughout any sort of change in monetary policies out there or through any sort of markets, there's always a shift of wealth from those that are educated and those that aren't educated. And a lot of people think Nathan talks just as a normal bloke, he seems pretty simple or whatever. I try to just say it as it is, and people can take their own knowledge from how I'm actually talking about things and what my knowledge into it is. But for me to be able to build a portfolio of 200 properties plus over the course of the last 15 years, after failing every grade from kindergarten to year 12 in the 12-year indoctrination camp, I know it's actually 13 years once you include kindergarten, 12, 13-year indoctrination camp. For me to be able to do that, being self-made, it's really important that I understand how financial markets work, how the system works, in order to be able to take advantage of opportunities out there as markets change and be ahead of the game rather than behind it. So what I've got up on the screen at the moment is, it looks like a lot of text for those that aren't too familiar with the bond market and interest rates. Basically, this here is the Treasury bond rate for the US dollar. So in essence, what this means is, I've been reading, bond rates and yields for the last decade. I got stuck at one point in my portfolio where I fixed interest rates because I was scared, like everyone else was out there. The interest rates could go to double digits. They could just keep rising, so on and so forth. And when I realized what underpins the actual markets, I was able to predict 12 months, 24 months, generally 12 months because 24 months is quite, shaky, how things are going to pan out. So I've been talking about this GFD, which is the GFC 2.0, and I promise not to get too negative. I'm just going to be talking about this stuff for the first 5 to 10 minutes, which is really, really important. This could be one of the most important things that I ever share with you, to have very clear clarity, and you'll never hear this from anyone else, because I haven't heard of anyone in the media or any financial expert or financial guru or financial advisor talking about this sort of stuff. So these are calculations that I come up with myself. So I personally feel once the 10-year Treasury bond gets to 3.2%, we're going to see it hit a thing called a death cross, and it's at a point of no return at that. The 10-year Treasury bonds have gone up dramatically over the course of the last 6 to 12 months. And if you've seen before that, they were sort of moving pretty straight and, you know, not going too fast. This here was 2.97 as of Monday. Now it's 3.09. So we're moving at a very rapid pace. And what I see happening is all the fundamentals off the table due to the level of manipulation out there in the financial system. So what am I talking about? If we have a look here, this curve, I'll explain and walk through all these charts. So what we see is today is the blue, and 3 months ago was the grey. So we've got the 30-year Treasury bond, the 10-year Treasury bond, the 5-year Treasury bond, and the 3-month Treasury bond. So what does all this mean? It means that over the last 3 months, the 30 years risen slightly, just a little bit. The 10-year Treasury bonds moved a bit further. The 5-year and the 3-month have moved a lot further. So if you have a look at this, the first one, the grey chart, it was much, you know, more curvier. And this, I predict, will go into an inverted yield curve. And I was actually, a lot of people think I'm a time traveler because I've been talking about the period of March to May 2018, where the cracks will show, and it will be very evident that we're heading to a recessionary cycle. However, you know, a lot of people will fear from that, but what they go to, because they get most of the education from, you know, either the 12 indoctrination camp or from, you know, the Kardashians or from Married at First Sight or whatever, is that this is going to get inverted. And in essence, you know, what will come after this, once the GFC 2.0 or the GFT comes, is a lot of stimulus, and debt becomes relevant with inflation. We're going to have the currency die. I don't believe that we'll see the dollar in existence for any further longer than the next 10 years. It'll probably be much quicker than that. And I'll go on to explain that a little bit further. I just put these together and actually shared them the other day to a few people, but this is another period, another part of it, which I'm calling the death cross. So once a positive yield curve turns into a negative yield curve, that crossover part is where we're ready for a recessionary cycle. So just keep an eye out for that, and we're going to move over to my next slides. What we can see here on the screen at the moment is the US Treasury bond rates. And when I say I understand how yield curves work, I've been following these things to be able to predict, you know, when I do my calls 6 months beforehand about what's going to happen with interest rates, so on and so forth. These are sort of you know, measures of where I got to look at. So if we have a look here, the blue line is 2016, the red line's 2017, and the green line's 2018. Over the course of the last 3 years, you've seen these two lines have just gone up a little bit, maybe a 1/4%, from down here at a 1/4% to 0.5%. But now we've seen them shoot up to 1.5%, and it's at such a greater sort of speed and velocity that is moving up on. You might be wondering, what's so important by it? If we have a look here, this green line, which is today, is crossing through the top of the last two charts, as I was talking about the death cross. But that ain't, you know, really the biggest interesting part of my conversation. I'm going to flick between this slide and the next slide now. This one here is the US Treasury yield curve from 03, 04, and 05. Now, if we have a look here, it was a different game, because the money since the GFC occurred, there was a lot more stimulus that occurred in the economies. If we look at all the financial markets around the world, you know, they're all stuck together. I got an email from someone in New Zealand today that was talking about the lending policies over there are quite tough. You're seeing all around the globe, what you're seeing here in Australia is the same news that you're seeing spread around, whether it be the US, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the Philippines, any sort of country, you're seeing the same sort of news. And why? It's because we're all pegged to the US dollar, and it's dying. So this is very different than what's occurred for many of the other sort of recessionary periods. But it's really important to take note here that in 2005, which is the green line here, it went up from 1% to 2%, and we know what happened in 2006, 2007. But if we take a look between these two charts, I'm going to see if my keyboard works, so I'm just going to use the keyboard for this moment. But if you have a look between them here, they're very similar. You'd think that you're looking at the same charts, you know? But the difference here is that this time it's moving at a much faster rate. We're seeing 1% just sort of overnight. This is from January 2018. Since then, it's moved up a lot. The 3-month is now at the 1.8. The 10-year is over the 3%. So this line here, which was at 2.5% only a few months ago, is now way up over here. So it's flat. If I was to pull this out on a new and updated chart, this would be flat and it would be up here, and it's much further. The gap is splitting very quickly, and I think that we won't see throughout 2018 without seeing the GFD. Just remember who called it the GFD, because I myself made that name. Now let's look at how this would relate to other times in the market. We're looking here at the US Treasury bonds in 2005, so it's a 6-month period, to 2017 to 2018. That's only a 3-month period here. But what we can see quite for sure, is that in 2005, we saw the death cross formation happen at the 10-year Treasury bond. And now what are we seeing? We're seeing it happen in 2018 at the 10-year Treasury bond rate. And what that indicates to me is that liquidity is starting to get tight, things are moving out of the market, all the financial markets are sick, and it's, you know, it's a very it's an eerie time. It's the calm before the storm. The difference, if you have a look here as well, is that these lines, this red line here, is almost straight. Like it's moving at a very, very fast rate. At least back in 2005, it was curvy and still had a bit of a, you know, upward swing over here. It was a bit more positive. So we saw what, you know, the bond rates are looking like here, which has been over the course of the last, you know, 3 months. It's becoming straight. This is what's called a negative yield curve or an inverted yield curve. Here is an example of the bond yield curves back in 2006 and 2007, just pre-GFC. Just remembering that what I've talked about in the other videos is that the dollar is not the dollar. The dollar changed in 1971. Every fiat currency in history, the first one was in 1024 AD in China. No fiat currency has lasted more than 45 years, and our dollar changed in 1971, where it peaked the US dollar and it became a complete fiat currency. It's only due to manipulation of different financial instruments that we're seeing these cycles go on for longer. What I personally feel is that as we start seeing these recessionary periods, they may be more deeper when it goes to the deflationary cycle, which is where we're heading into now, and the upswing will take a lot more stimulus. So the stimulus that got put into the system is in 2007, 2008 is very, it's in uncharted waters. We've seen, you know, I don't like the certain people that comment out there in the media about the financial markets globally. However, you know, even they have admitted that we're in uncharted waters, and this is something that the financial markets of the world have never ever seen. It's the first time ever that, you know, all currencies are sort of going to be hyperinflated at the same time. But looking here, what happened in 2006, 2007, the yield curve became extremely inverted, which will suck out liquidity from the market and make things tighter and tighter. So keep an eye out. That will occur. I think that will look more like that over the period of the remainder of 2018. And I'd be surprised if we get past November before we see the crash. So does it mean that we have to go and put a tinfoil hat on? No, it just means to be prepared. I really have no benefit to tell you guys this. You know, people say Nathan's a property spruiker. I just say things as they are. You know, if someone, I can't control the property market, I can't control the financial markets. People that control the monetary supply control the markets. It's important to know that. If we go and look at, you know, countries like Venezuela, Argentina, Greece, even a few years ago, you know, basically what happens in these periods of time is that the poor and the middle class, just the everyday people, become poorer and poorer as the dollar dies, and we'll see more chaos each time these situations occur. So the point of why I'm trying to share it is, first of all, just to be prepared. When there is any sort of recessionary sort of times, it's a fantastic time to see a change of wealth from one hand to the other. And the weak hands part with their money, the strong hands get the money at the right time. So if you can be educated in that sense, you can take advantage of these situations as they come up. So that was what I'm going to talk about on the weird stuff today. And then I'm getting into today's agenda. So we'll be looking at how to build a property portfolio, what to consider before you get started, setting the right goals, having the right strategy, where to get the deposit from, how many properties is enough, why the importance of the first 10 properties in a foundation portfolio is very important. What does the foundation portfolio do? Why the 3 keys to investing? I've talked about these 3 things. For over the last decade, since I've been in the public eye, people just think it's boring. As always said, right from day one, is that property investing, if done right, isn't sexy, it isn't flash, but it's very fundamental. If you want sexy stuff, with different sort of returns, there's many different financial instruments out there in the markets. Go and play around with them. But from a very fundamental sort of standpoint, we live in an attractive country. People want to move here. People want to come here. We're a young country. Property is a sound part of our economy. So there's always an abundance of people that want them, and having the right fundamentals there is very important. So with it, what to consider before one is to start investing in the property. First and foremost, it's important to understand what your goals are. I treat my property investing like a business, and it's important that I say to people that they should treat their households like a business, and sometimes people feel that you can't treat everything like a business, whatever, but you need to treat your finances like a business, because if you don't know where your cash flow is going, if you don't know where your cash flow is coming from, if you don't know how to tweak your cash flow, or your capital coming in, then it's going to be very hard. You're just working from emotion, hope, and off a whim. And to be able to get the most out of your investing and most out of your sort of position, it's important to understand the whole game board and what you're working with. So working out what are your goals, working out what it is that you're trying to achieve. Where are you today in your position? A lot of people come in and say, I don't know, they might be on 200 grand, no debt, couple hundred grand in savings, and they might be like, oh, I hope I can buy a property every year for the next 5 years. And it's like, well, you could possibly do that in the next 12 months. I see other people that come in, they're on 20, 30 grand, 40 grand salary, try to claim back every tax deduction, got mountains of debt, and so on, have 100 houses in the next 12 months. And it's important to understand what is realistic and what is achievable, and what you can do in that with what you've got. I think everybody's got a position. If you've got 2 arms, 2 legs, and you're a healthy person, you have the ability to earn an income. You have the ability to cut back on costs and work around. Obviously, some people's financial positions are different with families and whatever comes into one's life. But I think it's important to understand where are you today, and what are your goals, and what is realistic from a goal side of things. What can you do to push yourself further on that front, as far as can I cut back on? I used to live off $1 a day. I laughed about it because back in the time, this is back in 2003, I was working at a job. Obviously, I was 18 years old, and basically I used to have these games with my colleagues where I'd say, let's all eat for $1 a day. I'd go over to Woolworths and try and spend $1 each. Everyone would eat for $1, and I'd spend $5. I'd get a 79-cent bottle of X soft drink and a couple of Frankfurts, can of baked beans, out-of-date loaf of bread, whatever the case may be. By sort of cutting all my costs down, I worked 2 full-time jobs so I could bring in the income. For me, I I wanted the job, so I didn't set up any sort of business. I tried, hustling. I'd buy a car or sell it, or I'd buy a caravan and sell it, or whatever. Just in trying to push that position further. And I'd staple my socks together. I would, instead of taking your tie to the dry cleaners, I used to wear a suit, cufflinks. That's a story for another day, but a tie I look as being like a noose around your neck, because it is, and the cufflinks are like a shackle around your arms, and being able to throw that away. That's why I, wear a pair of flip-flops or thongs every day, and wear jeans and wear a t-shirt, because I just like living life on my terms. And that's what, sort of investing meant for me, is that I could do the things I wanted to do when I wanted to do them and how I wanted to do them. So, sort of understanding what is your reason, that can be a good motivation point of view to work out, where are you today? Where do you want to be? What are the sacrifices you're going to have to make? Are you prepared to do the sacrifice? Because most people don't want to do the sacrifice, but in return, what they do sacrifice is 40 years of their life working for someone that they hate, doing something they don't like to do. And if you were to think about it and you were to remove a monetary aspect to your life, you'd probably be doing something greater than what you're doing at the moment. If you're doing what you love to do, then great, and happy days, and you live in the dream already. But for most, they get stuck, being put through the sausage press of an indoctrination camp and brainwashing to become good tax slaves for the system. It's not really, where humanity should be, or, there's a better way of life out there. So it's important to work out what hurdles there could be along the way. There's always challenges. Nothing's ever easy. My first house that I bought, it had termites in the roof. I did a reno on it. And the roof caved down, and I had to fix the roof up. It was funny. It was lucky, I guess, that it crashed down before I went to put tenants in there. I tried to build a granny flat on the property, and I realised that when I built the granny flat on the property, obviously I was 18 years old. It was not council approved. I just tried turning the garage into a thing. With it, I've just seen someone blog it now saying they're sorry they're late because they're just having a pina colada. Awesome stuff. So with it, I got into trouble from council. They tried, making me knock it down. I had to go and get it approved and all that sort of stuff. Most people will get the shits and throw the towel in long before they even start out on their journey. So, the world stands aside for the person who knows where they're going. And if you, have, confidence and focus on where you're going, you have a solid plan, it's much more sort of achievable to get that. So where to get your education from, there's lots of stuff out there nowadays which I didn't have. I didn't have someone on webinars telling me, information to think of. I didn't have access to YouTube. I didn't have access to looking up properties on the internet. It was a very, very different place back in the day. There's lots of resources out there. Be sure to, sort of emulate successes from people that have done. There's so many scammy salespeople out there that just sort of try and do something for a buck or try and get their money out of someone. They generally wear the nice suit and glossy brochures and all that sort of stuff. And, be very, very careful where you're getting that information from. The worst place you can get the information from that I found in my life is, friends, colleagues, even your family. They'll give you their opinion. Some people will give them out of jealousy. Your family will probably give them to you out of care factor. But, if you buy into those things, there is a good chance that, you could hurt yourself by leaving an opportunity on the table. So, and just from another side of things, before getting started, I didn't realize it at the start that I need to understand. I've just talked about, those charts and the monetary policy and the bond yields and all that sort of stuff. I didn't know those things right at the start. There's lots of things that, you learn along the way. For me, the reason why I have to go and understand how the whole financial system works, not because I go and invest in the stock markets or anything like that, but just simply for the fact that I need to know how the monetary system's working, where it's coming from, where it's going. I personally have close to $20 million worth of debt. I have reduced that over the recent times to a lower level, but I need to understand how money works in order to be able to make it work for myself. So look at how you can grow, how you can improve, how you can consistently be bettering yourself to become the best of what you want to do. And also, I forget what I was going to say on the last part. It wasn't that important, but I'll move over to the next slide. Setting the right goals and having the right plan. There's, as I was saying beforehand, there's lots of people that sort of run seminars, have lots of cool stuff to sell you, properties off the plan. I'm looking at the media at the moment. For those that have been following me for a very long time, I'm always in the media every month. I'm doing TV articles, or interviews, or high news stuff or whatever. What I haven't been doing is hopping out in that market because I'm just sitting back and watching what a lot of crap that's coming out of people's mouths that are experts that are trying to spruik their own wares. A property is, as a wide part, we've got like a dozen businesses that are surrounding the property market. So it's in a vested interest for me to talk it up and all that sort of stuff. But if it isn't right, I'd rather say it as it is. And there's a lot of people out there giving misinformation because they're trying to sell loans. Like it's a bank or a mortgage broker, they're trying to sell you loans. If it's a developer, they're trying to sell you their properties. They don't want fear out there in the marketplace or whatever. But what it does, it takes a skilled person to be able to make money throughout any sort of market. And, as I said, I retired from the workforce during the GFC. So it's a matter of getting that right strategy in place. There's people out there, as I was saying, selling courses on renos and subdivisions. Pay us $10,000 and we'll go and teach you how to renovate a property. I've only got one property, but I'll teach you how to renovate a property. Or I'll pay me money and I'll go and show you how to do a room rental. There's so many of these people out there. And when I first started this business, I did it out of fun. I didn't do it because I had to do it. I'd quit my job and I just really wanted to have people around me that were doing the same sort of thing that I was doing as well. So looking at the strategies for me, when I first started investing, I was 18 years old when I bought my first property. I was 13 years old when I got excited by property, and I come from a family where my parents were nearly 50 when they had me. My brothers are like 20 years older than me. I saw them buying properties, a house to live in, whatever, and I was like, I want to own a property, and my family ain't rich. I come from a blue collar, struggling sort of family, and I wanted to be rich, and I realized that rich people had properties, and I set this goal that I wanted to have 10 properties by the age of 30. Most of my friends were probably getting magazines and sticking them down under their beds at the time. That all the pages were stuck together with girls in them. I had the property magazines, looking at them the same way. I say that as a joke, I didn't really, but I wanted to use property as a vehicle, and I thought to myself, if I could have 10 properties by the age of 30, I'd be really, really rich, and it'd be really, really cool. I didn't factor in lots of different things throughout that period of time. I thought it was impossible. There was no one, I never saw anyone that had 2 properties, 5 properties, 10 properties. There was nothing in the media. There was no one out there making YouTube videos or whatever. And for me, I thought, how would I go about doing it? And I lived in Western Sydney, and I went and tried to find the cheapest area to buy properties. And I remember the boom when I first started looking at properties. There was houses out in Mount Druitt, Western Sydney, for like $50,000. They'd rent for $100 a week. And I'd never been there in my life. And I saw it, and I was like, this area looks really, really bad and all this sort of stuff. But someone's renting it out. If I do my calculations, I failed every grade at school, but maths I was good at. People call me the human calculator. But I figured out, if I could buy one of those things, how long would it take me to save up 50 grand? And I was thinking at the time, an average wage was like 40 grand. I could save up and buy a property every year and live on nothing. What happened between 98 and 2002, 2003 is that we saw a property boom. At the end of that property boom around 2003, when I first started buying property, the property market was at a peak. If we think back the Sydney market, everyone, all they have is a short memory of, it's been going up, it's been going up. But when you take a walk back down memory lane, what you'll see is that the market peaked out in 03, prices turned to shit, and it didn't turn to shit. A place hit 300 or 280 for one of those 50k properties, and it sat there until 2008, 2009 when the GFC came and all the interest rates went down and the prices went up again. But what I realized, if I'd been saving my ass off to try and buy one of those properties, it went up every time I saved 10 grand, it would go up by 20, 30 grand, 40 grand. And that's what made me realize at a very young age, before I was 18, that debt becomes relevant with inflation. I'm getting a question here, do I want some nachos? They sound good. I need some dinner soon. With it, so that market is that the market went up as I was trying to save, and it made me really look at the financial markets at that point, but I was too excited by getting the properties. If I'd have been able to read the markets a little bit different, then I probably could have had a different result, maybe added, doubled my figures or whatever. But, for me to get 10 properties by the age of 30, it was a pipe dream. I worked 2 full-time jobs. I was trying to, get a six-figure salary. At an age of 18, 19, 1 year I had 7 days off in the whole year, and a lot of times I'd do like 18-hour days, 20-hour days sort of thing, working the 2 full-time jobs. And I just saved every cent I could, pumped in the property, bought my first one, bought my second one, bought my third one. My family thought that they were proud of me for the first one, proud of me for the second one. Third one, they felt like, they all thought I was, like Britney Spears, about to shave my head and go off the rails. And, 5th, 6th, 7th, it became like an intervention. By the time I was 21, I had like 8, 9 properties. By the time I was, 24, 25, I remember I had 25 at the age of 25. And I didn't really talk to my family through that period of time about what I was doing, the active investing that I was doing, because they thought it was a Fruit Loop. And they're probably right, but, it's having that strategy, and that's why I'll talk about setting those foundation portfolios to start off with. So I want to get the foundations locked away, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on that front. But for me, getting the foundations down is important. Working out that plan of how you're going to get the foundations, and then lay the more riskier stuff on top. I think it's important to work out sort of how long your plan is, like what is the time frame for that, being realistic, having a strategy. Having the right team around you. I'm doing this webinar right now. I'd like to take the credit to say, I've built these companies, they're all cool, they're the best in the industry, all that sort of stuff. But I'm only as good as the people that I've got around me myself personally. And as a property investor, starting out or going along your journey, you've probably discovered, shit people along the way. 10 people can do a certain task, but 1 can do it amazing. And the other 9 may not. So it's important to find those right people on your team, minimize risk, treat your property investing like a business. And as I remember, it was only probably about 2 months ago, I was flicking through some old boxes that I never unpacked in my house, and there was these flyers that I kept just for monumental sort of pieces of nostalgic value of my first flyers that I did for Be Invested. And I used to have on the bottom of all the stuff that numbers don't lie, and that's really important, because the numbers will tell you facts. Your emotions can lie for you. You can get a blurred reality from looking at other stuff rather than just your numbers. So the numbers will tell the story for you. Moving on to where can you get a deposit from? I don't know who's on here tonight, or who's going to be watching this in the future on the replays, but whether you're a first home buyer, whether you're a person that's already got 1 or 2 properties, whether you want to build a property portfolio of 10, 20, 30 properties, excuse me, working out with working out where to get that deposit from is really important. So for me, I worked 2 full-time jobs. There was no Uber, there was no any of that sort of stuff. I probably would have just driven the car around 23 hours a day if Uber was around back in the day, even though that I probably wouldn't have been able to service the loans. It's important to work out, have a budget in place, every bit of income. I used to calculate down to how many haircuts I have a year. If I could save on 3 haircuts, save on eating, save on clothing, all that sort of stuff, then I could save more money. So knowing where your income's coming from, that's one part of the equation. The other part is where is your leakage in your in your budget. So having a budget to identify that stuff, saving up towards it, maybe selling some shit off. You know, we've all got some doodads that'll be sitting around the house, whether it be a jet ski or a motorbike, or, you know, I've seen people sell their cars. Like I was talking to a client actually probably about 6 months ago, and we're having a meeting in my office, went across the road to the pub, and had a couple of clients with me, and one of them said, oh yeah, I was walking back and he hopped in his car, and I was like, oh, you got a Porsche? And he's like, yeah, I bought a Porsche. I was like, didn't you have one before? And this guy had a Porsche and sold it. It was, you know, just catching public transport. And he made a goal that when he got his like 10th property that he'd buy a Porsche again, and he was able to do that. And that's what, you know, his sacrifice was. So, you know, whatever it is, everyone's got some collections that they collected over time, possibility of selling some stuff, get a second job, maybe, you know, pulling equity. So what I've seen a lot, and probably what a majority of my clients are, like if I was to look at my, you know, property investment agents, which is my buyer's agency, and the clients that have helped out over the years, a large portion of them are, you know, Gen Ys that are trying to sort of get ahead in investing, and a lot of them, the other big portion of them is mums and dads that might have bought a property going back 10 years ago. They bought it for 400, got a loan of 300, now it's worth 900. They've got equity sitting in there, they've pulled out equity, built a property portfolio, where they've, you know, sold off some properties to pay down their debt, so on and so forth. So, you know, a lot of people don't realize equity in their properties or their existing properties. Being creative as to, you know, how you can actually come up with the funds, like whether it be, for myself, I know personally, I've been multiple situations, and it has caused problems for me where I haven't been able to buy a property. Most people think I have green notes hanging out of my ass, which I wish I did. But unfortunately, you know, I hate money, right? I hate money because debt is dollars that we use lose their value very quickly. So I'm always constantly trying to put my money out there to work. That's my capital that I put out there, and I try and make it work for me in order to get the best returns on what I've got at hand. And sometimes I'll put out, I'll purchase properties and put them out like 3-month settlements, 6-month settlements, 12-month settlements, 18-month settlements, so on and so forth, because you may be able to save up the deposit to buy the property, but in a moving market like we've just been through, 61 months I think it is, the Sydney market just itself has moved in an upwards direction. I can buy a property and buy it at today's price and settle on it in 2 years' time or whatever, and be able to save up that deposit in the meanwhile. In this current market, I wouldn't suggest to do that sort of stuff, but it has been a tool that's worked for me by being creative and purchasing certain properties with delayed settlements. The longest that I've had was a 4-year settlement on a property, and you know, it's not a matter of just understanding about the property. I also have to understand how laws work and all different things. So there's a lot of stuff that comes into the equation for me to be able to get to where I am, because you know, I need to know how I can delay a settlement if I have to, and push through via the lawyers in order to make that sort of things happen. And you know, it's probably partly why, you know, I started off talking to people on video with a face full of pimples, and now it's got a face full of grey hair. I use other financial instruments as well. Back in the GFC, also big time with my own eyes I was, you know, stock trader, share trader, back in the day. I don't like shares that much. Today, I use a lot of different financial instruments. One of them is cryptocurrencies, which I'm very heavily invested into and knowledgeable upon. But yeah, you look at other financial instruments that can carry you down the road. As I said, none of this is financial advice. I'm just talking about things that I'm doing personally myself. If you were to use something like that word I just mentioned, which is crypto, it is very heavily volatile. I think it's important also to speak to, sorry, I still got this flu, speak to a finance strategist and have someone that can be able to help you blueprint your finances out when it comes to you know, pulling out equity, servicing for your next deal, etc., because you know, if you can pull equity out of a property and you get a property that gives you 50 grand equity, you've got to consider how long is it going to take you to save up that $50,000 for your next deal. And finally, if you're just starting out, you know, depends on the relationship with your parents, depends on all that sort of stuff. But, you know, I have seen over the last few years with the inability for Gen Y to be able to buy properties, that, you know, mum and dad equity in their properties, they've got access to capital, maybe that, you know, that could be something where people sort of co-invest or borrow the equity or get a helping hand from them. Once again, not your financial advisor, be very, very careful with what you do there. Lots of things can go wrong, but, you know, just as different sort of options that are out there in the market. Just having a look here, trying to read comments here, lots of comments coming through. How many properties is enough? So it depends, I guess, on what your plan of attack is. For me, one thing, as I said, I wanted to own 10 properties by the age of 30. I didn't think it was possible. I thought to myself, if 10 properties at $200 a week rent, which was the rent back at the day, what sort of figure would I be on? And I thought, you know, 10 properties, $200 a week rent, if the rent's covering the mortgages, which it wasn't at the time. My properties were heavily negative. When I first started buying properties, I was negative like $800 per week at one point. It's changed a lot over the time. Sometimes I do go negative, sometimes I go positive. But, you know, I thought if I could have 10 properties and the rents were $100 a week positive in my portfolio, because a property may be negative by $10, $20, $30 a week today, but if you bump the rent up by $10, $15 this year, $20 next year, $10 a year after, whatever, if you're increasing those rents, they soon do become neutral cash flow and then positive cash flow. So that's the thing I didn't equate in my calculation when I first started, is that if I had 10 properties, they gave me $100 a week positive cash flow. 10 times 100 is $1,000. 1,000 times 52 is 52 grand a year in my pockets. Pockets, I've got a few pockets on my jeans, but yeah, I didn't factor that in at the time. But I thought, you know, if we look at it today, a lot of areas and capital cities where you can pick up sort of bread and butter properties that give you $300 a week, you might pick them up for 200, 300,000, give you $300 a week in your pocket. That's 15 grand. So if one property was to bring in 15 grand, and let's assume you wanted to have 100 grand a year passive income. This is the importance of having goals and being able to go forward, look at where the future looks, working out where you are today, where you are in the future, and then just filling in those gaps as to moving forward. Seeing lots and lots of questions coming through. Keep the questions coming through. I'll try and answer them at the end. If we go over time, I will try and cover a lot of the questions in YouTube videos over the course of the next couple of weeks. But if you're working out you want 100 grand a year passive income, then that means that you need 7 properties returning you 15 grand a year, or 7 properties at $300 a week, and that's going to return you $105,000 a year. Just talking rough numbers here. From that point, it'd be like 105,600 or whatever. But working out from that point of view, okay, if you had 7 properties that were returning you $300 a week, that were returning you 100 grand a year, you'd still have mortgages and all that sort of stuff on it. So if you wanted to have 100 grand a year passive income, you would probably need 7 owned outright. So how do you get 7 outright? You could, you know, get those 7 properties, buy extra amount of property, sell off some, pay down the debt, so on and so forth. And, you know, you could, in essence, I've seen a lot of people do this where they buy, say, 15, 20 properties, the prices go up, they sell off some, use the profits, pay down some debt, bingo, you've got a property portfolio unencumbered. I see that properties have just a purpose, that all they do is buy you an option into the future and gives you different options and choices of what to do as time goes on in your life and you progress in life. After you sort of build the foundation portfolio, you can buy them, build them. Some people look at having a house and granny flat. Some people like all sorts of stuff. I like keeping the foundation portfolio as simple as possible, because I know the hurdles that I overcome when I was building my portfolio in those first 10 properties. There's lots of things that can be stressful and cause you pain. There's so many variables that come into it. Keeping it very vanilla and keeping the foundation properties very simple is sort of very, very important on that front. You can use the equity. Let's say, for instance, you've got the 10 properties or 15 properties or whatever you need at that period of time. You could then pull out equity, buy some more properties at a positive cash flow, buy some commercial properties. You can wait for the rents to rise and just live off the positive cash flow. You could buy 10 and build a granny flat on a couple of them. You could sell off half of them. You could buy commercial properties with them, so on and so forth. But if you were just to think about it and buy 10 properties and have 10 properties as quick as you can buy them, and let the inflation do its thing, see the cash flow go up, see the capital value go up, and let's assume that you've got 10 properties, the neutral cash flow today, over the course of the next 10 years, they just go up by $10 per week, each property for the next 10 years, then that's $1,000 a week in your pocket, 50 grand positive cash flow. So, it's important to work backwards and reverse engineer, where you are today, where you want to be in the future, what steps you need to take along the way, what things you need to do in order to get yourself finance ready, what things you need to do to get your deposit ready, and obviously adding the right properties along the way and having the right team around you along the way is important as well. So I always look at 10 properties as a good foundation portfolio to work with. If you buy a property for 200 grand and it's worth 250, the three things I've talked about: below market value, upside for capital growth, and a strong cash flow. The cash flow is just so it services itself. The upside for growth is why you're buying it, and below market value. So if you're buying a property that's 50 grand below market value today, this works better on smaller acquisitions and on capital city type of properties. The reason being is that if you're buying a property that's worth 600 grand and you need to get an X amount of dollars, the percentage that you need is going to be so much greater, and the parameters move out of line and don't work. So, I always like to stick around the $200,000-300,000 mark. Sometimes I do add in to portfolios for people different sort of strategies, some other sort of properties with a bit of twist on them. If it's required to understand how the finance works, understand how the properties work, and each property needs to play a part of the jigsaw puzzle as the total picture. So yeah, I try to keep them as basic as possible and as vanilla as possible. But if you're to buy a property for 200, it's worth 250, you pull out 80%, say have an 80% loan on it. You buy a $200,000 property, you get an 80% loan on it, you get a loan for 160, you drop down 40 grand plus 10 grand closing costs. So you see 50 grand deposit and you get a loan at 160. You go back, revalue it, comes up at 250, you pull out 80% of 250, which is 200. 200 minus the 160 is 40,000. You've got 40,000 there that you can pull out as equity and use towards your next deposit to get property number 2, number 3, number 4, so on and so forth, as well as saving and sort of finding the hustle to build that portfolio moving forward. So the importance, I guess, of building the foundation portfolio, for me, I've talked about lots of weird properties over the years. So they started off by buying, 3-bedroom houses out Western Sydney, 2-bedroom units, all those sorts of things, just the basic vanilla type of deals, to then go to some regional areas because I needed cash flow at a point when I quit my job. So I went down this real dirty road of buying destroyed houses in really underprivileged sort of housing commission areas. A lot of people probably never even get to experience to see how bad these areas are, but I literally picked up properties for like 1 or 2 grand or 5 grand really shit sort of areas, and renovated those things, improved my cash flow from using them, and then was able to go buy some more foundation properties. And as I sort of built my portfolio to certain points, I'd add in a couple of layers of more strategically sort of placed properties. So blocks of units, motels, shopping centres, acreage sort of land for future subdivision sort of sites. So that was probably the thing that was a bit hardest for me, is those ones, because the cash flow sort of got a big pull when there's not much cash flow coming in on those sort of properties. But the only ability for me to be able to buy those big type of properties is by having solid foundations. And I remember when I bought, I got this property, I bought this block of 36 units, it's west of Sydney. I bought it for $1.6 million. I had to settle it cash, and there was a lot of people that wanted to buy it, but they couldn't get the finance for it, because it was a weird property to finance at the time. And the only way that I was able to buy it is that that property was $1.6 million, it returned $400,000 per year. The only way I was able to buy that property was buying it cash. If you were to sink all your money into that sort of property, if you had $1.5 million cash, it would be very, very risky, due to the fact that after I bought it, it was a motel. I rented it out to Housing Commission, got good rent. The Housing Commission tenants caused a lot of trouble. I had to kick them out. They left the property. I gave them all notice. They left. And then it started getting trashed and vandalized and all that sort of stuff. And I wasn't earning an income from that for a period of like 2 or 3 years. And looking at it from that point of view, if you had that sort of debt with no income at all, it would really hurt someone to do so. So how I was able to purchase that property was, I went back to the properties that I bought for 150, 200 grand 10 years prior, pulled out equity. So you pull out 100 grand from 15 of them, I can use that equity to go and buy the property cash. That was just a brief example of how I was able to do that. It wasn't exactly as simple as pulling out 15 properties at 100 grand, but you sort of get the gist. If I didn't have the foundation properties there, I couldn't have done sort of more of that fun sort of stuff in the portfolio. So having the right strategy is key, and that takes us on to after 10 properties in your portfolio, because I think there could be some of you guys that are my clients that have built thousands of people's portfolios that have got the 10 plus properties in them, or close to 10 properties in them. And I think that over time people sometimes get complacent, they get happy just holding these properties, but they don't think about the strategy as to what's moving forward and all that sort of stuff. So after 10 properties, what do? You can just let them sit there and take care of themselves and check back in another 10 years. But 10 years of your life working for a boss that you hate, doing something that you don't like to do, you can sit there and be complacent, but how complacent really is it? So it's important to be proactive in order to, push it to the next level. And I remember one of my staff here, had a goal of having a certain house. I got him into a castle on 5 acres and all that sort of stuff. And I remember at the time, like, I had to discuss, selling down, 3 or 4 of your properties and all that sort of stuff, and the cash flow sort of worked, and the position was awesome. And the staff member never would have believed that they could have got into that sort of property 5 years beforehand, but having the right properties in the portfolio and having it structured correctly gave them options in order to, sell off, dispose of some properties, and using that capital in order to get themselves into the dream home. So it could be a matter of using a portfolio to get into your dream home. It could be a matter of, selling off some to pay down some debts. It might be a matter of continue on a new strategy. You could do more riskier sort of deals, look for more cash flow sort of deals, look for commercial properties, look for blocks of units for cash flow. What I had as a strategy the last couple of years is people that have got their foundational portfolios laid, buying land cheap, below market value, building houses on, selling them off for a profit, using that profit to pay down their debts and move forward by paying off their debts without having to sell off their original portfolio. It might be a matter of buying some acreage, future land subdivisions, doing subdivisions, unit blocks, and yeah, like for me, I had the shop. I've got a few strips of shops and shopping centres and stuff in my portfolio. And I wouldn't recommend that as a normal sort of strategy. The reason being is that, you know, how many times do you drive down Parramatta Road and you see all those vacant, shitty shops that take years to rent? I remember in my first office here in Bella Vista that lots of offices were just vacant for years and years and years. Nowadays, it's not such the case, but you know, when I first started the business, it was just after the GFC and it was sort of tough time. So, you know, if there was a point where people pulled out their leases and stuff like that, it's a glut of these properties on the market, you could have a property vacant for 2 or 3 years. So there is a much higher risk there. I bought this shop on the Central Coast. I rented it out to a national tenant. I've got a lease on it for 20 years. It's about 100 grand a year at the moment. It goes up by 3% every year for the next 20 years. I bought it for like 465,000. You can build units on top of it, opposite the water, opposite the ocean. Current value is probably like 2 mil. I did all right. But the person before that owned it had it vacant for 10 years. And having a place vacant for 10 years is, you know, isn't really good for one's cash flow. For me to be able to buy that property, I needed to throw down like a 50% deposit on it. And a lot of people, you know, if you think all your cash into one of those deals is going to be a flop, you know, it's a bit risky. So it's important to work out what is your strategy, how you're going to get to freedom, and working back and reverse engineering it. Some people say I want to have 1 million houses, you know, some people say I want to have 200 houses, like, or properties like Nathan has, or whatever. You know, it ain't a race or a comparison to compare to anyone else that's out there. It's not to compare to your mates and say I'm doing better than you. It's not a competition to say I want to be like this. Emulating success, but having your own journey as to what is important for you to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And, you know, important to, you know, once you know where you are and where you want to be, you can fill in those gaps quite easily. And then it's a matter of, once you've got, you know, your step list and to-do list, it's a bit like, you know, going on a travel and reading the sat nav, turn left here, 500 meters, turn right, take the second exit out of the traffic circle. It's, you know, it's got a lot more clarity as to where you're heading. So make sure you get the strategy right. And, you know, once you get to the, you know, foundation portfolio, the foundation portfolio might be 10, it might be 8, it might be 7, it might be 15, it might be 20. And then work out, okay, now I've got these, do I need to sit on my hands for a while? You know, the last 24 months, like I was settling a shitload of property when I fell into the issues with APRA because I didn't see the laws being changed very quickly. And it made financing very difficult for me. So for me, I went through a slight consolidation phase, which sometimes is important to do. I never really went through a consolidation phase, but, you know, at that period of time of, you know, I had to settle, you know, $10 million worth of property at the same time, and it was a shit fight, and it was like every month I was getting stuck with another settlement, another settlement, another settlement. So that's where the risks do come in from that, but from staging your settlements for too far in the future. But throughout, you know, the furthest, like the side where we are today, I didn't just sit there and go, okay, I'm not going to do anything now. I wanted to make sure that I could improve my cash flow positions on some of my properties, do renos on other properties, add extra dwellings to other properties, so I can actually bring in greater cash flow. So, you know, always look for how you can improve your position and take it to the next level. What does a foundation portfolio do? Lots of questions coming through. I'll try and get to them a little bit later, just depending on how quick. I think I've got a few more slides here to go. What does the foundation property portfolio do, and why is it so important? I think I've covered off on it a fair bit this evening, but in short, it gives you options. It minimises risk along the way, because, you know, I see so many people that, you know, go, I want to develop, I want to renovate, I want to subdivide, I want to build a granny flat. You know, there's risks that are associated with that. If you can remove the greater part of the risk and follow the 3 simple parts to a property portfolio, then, you know, you can get there a lot quicker, build up your asset base, watch the asset base go through a market cycle, as well as doing those other cool things that you want to do, but a little bit later on. So it's a foolproof strategy if executed correctly. And, you know, it's something that people try to overcomplicate things. You know, if I said to you, here's $1,000 a week, you've got, you know, if I bought 10 properties for 200 grand, there's 200 grand worth of properties at time of purchase was worth 2.5 million, and that 2.5 million doubled. So a property that was worth 250 10 years ago is worth $500,000 now. If you bought them for 200 grand, that's where you make your money on the way in. But, you know, if I said to you, follow this simple strategy, get those properties knocked off, those properties in 10 years time go from 200 grand to 500 grand, you've turned $2 million, which is probably leveraged to a great extent. You know, financed by the banks, 80% loans. So let's say, for instance, $2 million worth of property, you have to put down $400,000 of your own money, $1.6 million worth of the bank's money, and take that through a market cycle. In 10 years time, those properties that have gone up from 200 worth 250, from 250 to 500, you've got $5 million worth of property with a $1.5 million worth of debt. That'll be a pretty good position to have a $3.5 million net worth position, and the cash flow is fairly neutral. And in return, if the rents go up by $100 a week, over that period of time, you've got 10 of them, there's $1,000 a week in your pocket. You know, a lot of people hang themselves on the fact that, you know, the property hasn't gone up $10 this year, or the prices haven't moved this year, or whatever the case may be. It's not guaranteed that every year that everything's going to run smoothly. It's important for you to understand that as you plan, but you know, okay, what am I going to do now to get my next deposit? I couldn't get the equity from here, or I couldn't service because of this, or service because of that. Is understanding what ways you need to navigate to get to the end goal, and having the foundation portfolio minimizes risk. I see people building stuff. I see a lot of, you know, the reason why I think there will be, you know, I've prepared myself and I'm preparing my clients and my investors that I help out on a day-to-day basis by pointing them in the right direction when it comes time to get your finances in order. If you saw the last webinar series on this, I was talking about, you know, getting your finances and the importance to be finance ready at all times, because, you know, there will be points where liquidity is drying up dramatically in this current market. There's going to be points where, you know, there's just people doing it tough, and you can take advantage of that in the nicest possible way. What I mean by that is, you know, people will be selling properties cheap because they need to get out of a tough financial position or whatever. And, you know, being cash ready, capital ready, and able to sign a contract will put you in the box seat in order to take advantage of those situations and get the properties cheap and pick up bargains for your own portfolio. You don't want to be one of those people which has got, you know, 5 knockdown rebuilds or whatever on the run at the same time, trying to, sorry, got something in my tooth. You don't want to be one of those people which, get stuck and, you know, not be finance ready or not have your foundation set up correctly. So that takes me to my next slide, actually, which is why, you know, the 3 keys that I always talk about are vitally important in the current market and have been important for me building my portfolio and sort of a risk minimization tool for my clients over the course of the last decade. The reason why is, you know, I sort of retired in the GFC. Moving forward just before it, things were shaky, probably 12, 24 months before I quit my job. I worked for a multinational company, and most of my colleagues, it was like hundreds, thousands of colleagues that I worked with, but in my office I had a couple of hundred. And from that, they're all scared about their job. They're scared about their employment. Like, these properties are too cheap, right? I just want to buy properties. I just want to buy, I want to buy, I want to buy. I was like a kid in a candy store. And with it, I wanted to make sure that if everything shit itself, that the rent would come in and pay for the property. That if I had to go get a job at Macca's and earn 30 grand a year, that I know the properties were looking after themselves. I had to pay for food, phone, petrol in the car, and accommodation expenses. I could keep it minimalistic, and my portfolio would look after itself until it gets to a better time. That's the importance of cash flow. It can take you through any market. In a capital city, you want to make sure that if you're in a capital city, you're going to see growth. You don't want to be buying in Port Hedland or any of those Karratha or those sort of mining towns and stuff like that. You know, if someone was to buy them, it would have to be for a specific strategy, and you have to be stealing it. A lot of people look at risky stuff. Oh, I heard that it's cheaper to buy in, I don't know, Ballarat or Wagga Wagga or wherever the case may be. Not saying that they're bad investments, but you know, I consider that Sydney is a New York of Australia. When we look at, you know, property prices, you go and watch an old episode of Seinfeld. Makes you feel old when you watch it, because it's probably about 25 years old now. When you go and watch Seinfeld, not only didn't they have mobile phones then either, or know what Snapchat or dog faces or selfies were. The main thing in Seinfeld that you see is that they're excited to get a lease. I remember that there was a time where Elaine was so excited by getting a lease to lease a unit, right? People there don't expect, well, How I Met Your Mother as well, you know? They're excited to get a lease on a new apartment, right? They're not saying, it's my birthright that I deserve to get a property, blah, blah, blah. We live in a country where everyone wants to be here. Sydney is the doormat to the country. People come in, they need somewhere to reside. That's why I think that Sydney, Melbourne even, I'm not a big fan of Melbourne. I think they've got more property than what they need there. Sydney's got an undersupply, and it's a shitty planned city, even though I'm living in Sydney and I grew up in Sydney and been here all my life. And Queensland, I think that's the most undervalued thing because of infrastructure that will go in and all that sort of stuff. But capital cities are what's going to see the majority of the growth over the coming years, and always have. And the other aspect is buying below market value. If you can buy the property below market value, that means that you've got, you know, you're making your money on the way in, so you're making profit, so you can use that as equity to pull out, or, you know, a risk buffer, as well as, you know, minimizing that risk along the way. And if we're going through a GFC 2.0 or GFD as I call it, then what are the measures that you're going to have in place? You know, buying it below market value. If it drops, if you buy the property 20% below market value and the market drops by 20%, I think there's going to be bigger problems than your price going down by 20%, right? And generally, there'll be a lot of stimulus to push that up. So if it does step down, it is a buffer. If you have to sell it, something goes wrong, whatever the case may be, you've made a buffer in there for yourself. You've got room for upside for growth. You're buying blue chip properties. I don't care if it's in the shittest street in Sydney or Brisbane or Melbourne or whatever. You're buying it well. It has good future fundamentals. So having a strong cash flow means that you can weather any sort of storm. So that's the reason why those three keys are important. Just on a caution note, just as I start to close off on today, most people that are in the finance space, most people that are in the property space, most people that are in financial planning space have been in the industry for less than 10 years. 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, they were driving trains, they were landscapers, whatever, and now they're suddenly a property guru, a finance expert, so on and so forth. So a lot of them get in the shit of recent times. Be very, very careful where you get your information from, just simply because you need to make sure that you can get through any sort of market, any sort of storm, and have, you know, solid foundations. A lot of, you know, brokers out there, just telling you whatever it is to get you to buy a property, so that you're going to pay, get a loan, and then you get paid a commission. Real estate agents out there, oh, you know, things are quiet, but you know, this is this, this is that, whatever the case may be. Very, very careful. Everyone has an opinion out there. Not a lot of people understand the importance of the monetary system that underpins the you know, the crucial parts of our economies. TV is full of shit. I've seen multiple things over the years, and I just disagree. 99% of the people out there that are giving the advice are stuck in their job to give you that advice. So be careful of where you're getting it from. Be careful of getting it from the ones that you love, the ones that you care about the most, that are around you. A lot of, you know, friends will get jealous or tell you advice because that's how they feel, or a sentiment. I remember when I was first starting out, you know, I was dating this girl, and you know, some of her friends or family or something were saying to me, why buy these properties that are out here? They're not good. You should buy over here. You should do this. You should do that. I was like, my numbers make sense. My things make sense that I've worked on, and I could have bought into any of these people around me, whether it be my colleagues that said, why would you buy more than 2 or 3 properties? That's stupid, right? Which came back to me a decade later and said, oh, you know, I'm so proud. I'm so sorry about what I said to you. The fact of it is that, you know, a lot of people that are around you will give you emotional sort of feedback, emotional opinions, emotional sort of advice, and that can be very, very detrimental for your success. So yeah, with it, it's be very, very careful as to where you get your actual advice from. And just on a final note, this is the final one of my webinar series. I said it was going to be a 5-part, and this is my 5th part of it. I said I was going to talk about lots of things. I can see questions here that are funny. Yes, I'm giggling, and yes, probably I thought so at the time. It was a question asking me if I was in love with the girl. Looking at the 5-part series that I talked about, I said I was going to be intimate. I said I was going to be raw. I was going to tell you as it is. How you take this information is all up to you. How you use the information, apply it to your own life. Whether you believe some of the stuff I'm talking about with the economy, whether you don't understand what I'm talking about with the economy, I question you. I always ask people to go and question everything that I say, because it is just an opinion. It's an opinion of how I sort of guide my decisions. There's lots of knowledge in my head. I've got an overactive mind. I sleep for 4 or 5 hours a day. The rest of it I'm awake, researching, understanding, sorting to grow. It's sort of researching, analyzing, and growing my mindset and my space. So it's important to, you know, yeah, just share my knowledge, but at the same time for you to question it. I appreciate that, because, you know, as I say quite often, is I'm not your financial advisor. This isn't financial advice, but, you know, giving you the ability to be prepared for different sort of markets that we're seeing and have seen or will see is probably the best thing that I can do for you guys, and to be able to guide you to safety or to kick ass is, you know, what I like to strive in. So from that point of view, this will be the last time that I talk about the mentoring as well. I've been asked a lot over the years to, you know, help mentor people, share my knowledge, share, you know, the 10 years, 15 years, sorry, of hardcore investing experiences, what I've got going in my head, how I make those decisions to get through certain situations, certain markets, and to keep kicking ass. And I've always been open on that front. So if you haven't seen any of these you know, webinars beforehand, this is the first time on. I will be running for the course of the next 12 months a mentoring program, which will be covering basically every aspect of property investing. It's purely property specific. I may venture off on a few occasions to some other finance areas, financial sort of instrument areas, to talk about some of those things, but generally be general property advice of all the things that have made me a self-made millionaire at the age of 21, helped me retire from the workforce at the age of 24 during the GFC. And I'll be talking about how to find deals, how to locate deals, how to structure your portfolio. I'll be bringing and sharing, all my team over the period of the 12 months, from financial advisors, accountants, lawyers, finance strategists, property managers, builders, everyone basically that I've got in my networks to share specific topics and so on and so forth. I have seen some questions that have come through regarding, do I do live events? I don't do live events. I only do live events to people that are inside the Be Invested community. And from that side of things, the mentoring program will be covering 12 months of fortnightly webinars, which will be interactive, and I'll be taking community feedback as to what topics specifically people want me to cover, and it will be intimate from that side. I'll be just saying it as it is to deliver the right content. But I will be also doing 3 live events for 2-day weekends. So you'll be getting to hang out with me for 6 days over the period of the next 12 months. And from that, it will be $3,000 for the 12-month mentoring program, which is less than what my personal trainer charges me. And I'll be covering off everything. You could be saving yourself 50 grand, you could be making yourself 50 grand. It could be far greater than that what you could learn for the next 12 months. If we look at what university degrees do, usually have to go away for 4 years with no income coming through in order to go and spend 50 grand or 100 grand of debt in order to go and get yourself a job of 50 to 100 grand a year. Here, I'll be giving you real life case studies and be walking you through what I see as being one of the biggest financial challenges in human history in order to give you guidance, as well as all of my usual property content from every aspect and delving deep into that. For those that sign up, it is $3,000 per year. For those that don't, over the course of the next short while, it will be going to $8,000, and they'll be closing off applications for people to come on board, and you won't be able to be a part of this mentoring program. So on that note, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for having me as part of your Thursday night evening, and we'll catch up soon and keep investing and kicking ass. Just got a last question. When does the mentoring start? Mentoring starts, I think it is in the next fortnight. It's the end of this month it's starting. So we're on the 18th tomorrow. Yeah, next 2 weeks will be starting. So you will get an email very shortly, which will come out with some further information on that mentoring program. So I will come and try and answer a lot of your questions and put them onto YouTube and get those answers out to you in the future. Have an awesome evening and keep kicking ass.